Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Adam Wallace, author of How to Catch a Turkey. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Paul. Good to be here.
Are you ready to get started?
Yeah, definitely. Let's do it.
All right. Question number 1. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
This is an interesting one. I think the best piece of advice to give someone writing their book is to finish the book, because I think that's the hardest thing, and that's something that a lot of people don't do. A lot of people say they could write a book, or they want to write a book, or they have a book in their mind but never actually write it or never actually finish it. And so I think that's probably the key, is just to sit down and get at least a first draft done, because then you've got something to work from. Whereas if you're just continually planning or thinking or talking about it, it's hard to get the momentum going to finish it. So yeah, I think just sitting down, writing a first draft, and then getting stuck into it from there.
And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
Well, for me, it was actually getting accepted by a publisher. I sent out, I think I had about 150 rejections before my first book got published, and I self-published in the meantime while I was waiting for that to happen. So yeah, I think getting seen in a lot of ways is hard, like in amongst the thousands of other submissions and everything that come in every year to publishers, and sort of getting above that slush pile and getting noticed. And what I've found is that actually getting to know and meet publishers has made a big difference in terms of getting books accepted. Having that sort of, once you get to know someone, and then maybe you skip the slush pile and you can send direct to them, and straight away that gives you an advantage. But that's not easy to do. So I went to a lot of networking meetings and book launches and seminars, and did everything I could to try and meet as many people in the publishing industry and writing industry as I could. And that's not easy for a lot of authors who may be a little introverted, or maybe don't have time or money to do these sort of things. So yeah, but actually getting out there and meeting people and getting into the industry and getting known in the industry, I think is a massive thing in helping getting published. But yeah, definitely not easy to do that, again, amongst thousands of other people who also want to do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I think it's the main thing in regards to the hardest part about getting published. It's really just getting published and knowing the route. And if you don't want to go down the traditional route, then don't be afraid to go down the indie route and do it yourself, because with the exception of Penguin Random House, and I've mentioned this on multiple episodes of the show, most of these traditional publishers still expect you to do the lion's share of the marketing. So you really have to ask, what value does a traditional publisher bring in versus working with a coach, or even working with a hybrid publisher like my own company that can actually help you with that process? Because the game has changed a lot. I mean, there's movies like The Martian and The Shack that were originally self-published books, and now they're movies. So I mean, the main thing is just to get your story out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I self-published as well. While I was getting all those rejections, I got kind of sick of waiting and self-published, and I actually still self-publish now, even though I've been picked up by publishers at the same time. And it is interesting that the sort of pluses and minuses of each method, the self-publishing and traditional publishing. I've done partnership publishing as well, and hybrid publishing. And yeah, I think there's sort of pluses and minuses to each way, but definitely it's much easier to self-publish now and do it yourself. You've still then got to get it out and get seen, and as you say, do the marketing and get noticed amongst all the other books that are getting self-published. But it's certainly a way to do it, and there are definite benefits to self-publishing as well.
So how many books have you published?
Up to about 52 now. So
wow.
That's, kicking on a bit, which is nice.
Well, I'm just working on number 14 right now. I'm quite impressed. So you've done 52 of your own books.
Yeah, well, so I self-publish, I don't know the actual numbers. I probably had traditionally published, it's probably about half actually, now I think about it. Yeah, probably half self-published and half traditionally published. So yeah, a bit of a mixture now, which is nice. And yeah, and so I do some that is just like a flat fee, pay for hire work, and some that's advance and royalties, and then the self-published ones, and yeah, so a bit of everything, which has actually been really great because it's forced me to look at different ways to get the books out there and learn different styles of writing and learn to write quickly, which I think is also a really important thing, because I just think the more books you can get out there, and not just churn them out, churning out rubbish, but if you can get sort of quality books and get them out there, that just means that if one starts to get a bit of momentum, there's that backlog that people can then go and look at as well. And just the more you get out there, the more chance there is of that one getting momentum, because you never know which book is going to actually click.
So how many years have you actually been writing? Because 52 books, that's a lot of books.
It's a lot of books. Actual writing, I actually didn't, after I finished high school, I didn't write for about 10 years. I hated English in my final year of high school, and went off and did engineering and went the maths science route. And so, yeah, from there, so I started writing year 2000, so about 18 years ago. And that was when I started writing and sending things out. And yeah, from there, actually as a sort of full-time career, it's been end of 2009. Was when I quit all the engineering and everything. So my first self-published book was 2005, and then first one through a publisher was 2007. So yeah, so it took 8 years to get, or 7-8 years to get that first one done, and then after that it kind of kicked into gear a bit. And I find that when you get accepted by a publisher, they'll often say, have you got anything else that you've been working on? And so for me, it was 8 years of writing. So I was like, yes, I do. Sit back and read all this. So, yeah, and definitely the last few years, it's kicked on a lot more as well. It's sort of been 6-7 books a year the last few years, so it's picked up a fair bit.
Yeah, I was going to say overall you've averaged about 4 books a year, and it makes me feel a little bit better. I'm on my 14th book right now, and I've been doing this for 3 years, so I feel a little better about myself after talking with you, because I'm okay, at least I'm on that pace of 4 a year.
That's right. I should have just said, I just started last year, 52 books in a year, 1 a week. That would have really thrown you.
Well, I'm sure that got the attention of our listeners, to say the least. When someone says that they have published 52 books, that's quite the journey.
Yeah, and it has been a real journey, actually, and I find I've learned so much from when I started, especially, but even from when my first book got published, but still learning constantly now. Like even I've got someone I just met recently, and who does Kindle ebooks on Amazon, which I sort of have dabbled in a tiny bit, but not much. But she does it and does it really well. So even there's another path to learn about and go down that path and see if that something can happen there. So there's kind of always new things to learn. And as I meet new people, I write children's books, obviously, and I find, especially in Australia, what I found is the industry is really supportive and generous, and other authors are willing to sit with you and chat, and yeah, so constantly learning all the time, and which is fantastic, because it means that your writing improves and your marketing, like everything, just improves as you go along, which is brilliant.
So all 52 of your books, were they all children's books?
Yes, nice. And vary in range. Like some are, some of these flat fee ones were for like 0 to 2 year olds, and were 10 pages with a line on each page, or not even a line on each double page spread, so 5 lines, which is actually the hardest book I've ever written. It took me weeks to write these 5 lines. It almost killed me. But then there's picture books and some short stories and novels, and then I do little how to draw books for kids as well, teach them how to draw cartoons. So all children's books, but kind of vary in ages and genre as well.
Well, I think the number one challenge with children's books as well is finding a good illustrator. So did you utilize the same illustrator for all your books, or did you work with a bunch of different people?
That's a really good question, actually. And it has been different illustrators, partly because working with a publisher, they will, well, what I've found is sort of 90% of the time, they'll just choose the illustrator. They'll have their stable of illustrators, and they'll say, we accept your story, or we'll take your story, and this person's going to illustrate it. And
Gotcha.
And I've been massively lucky that the ones that I've chosen have been fantastic, which has been great. So like the How to Catch a Turkey and that How to Catch series is Andy Elkerton, who's brilliant. And then in Australia, I've used a few different ones, or been given a few different ones through publishers, which has been great. And with my self-publishing, I illustrate some of them myself, the how to draw ones. But the other ones, again, part of getting into the industry and meeting people and knowing people is that you do get to meet these amazing illustrators. So I've been lucky enough to have friends who are some of the best illustrators in Australia. Some have worked in books and animation. I've one friend who worked for Disney Studios who illustrated one of my books. And yeah, so I agree in that. I think especially in kids' books, the illustrations are massive. Even not just for the kids. Like if I'm going out and showing my books to people, a lot of adults won't even read it. They'll flick through looking at the illustrations and to get an idea of the story that way. So even for adults, never judge a book by its cover. That's what people do with kids' books. They totally judge it by the cover and the illustrations. So yeah, it's really interesting. But yeah, I've been very lucky. James Hart and Heath McKenzie and Serena Geddes are the three main ones that I've used self-publishing, and they're fantastic. They're really, really good.
Yeah, a lot of visual learners out there. That was always me. I always loved seeing the pictures and the illustrations.
Yep, same. Yeah, and I'm not good at visualizing things in my own mind. Like I don't read something and am able to visualize it easily, but I'm similar in that if I can see something or watch something, it sinks in a lot better for me when I'm learning too.
Well, now with 52 books, I'm assuming you've learned a little bit about marketing. So for our next question, please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that worked well.
So this is probably not a traditional answer that you may expect. I've done quite a few book launches in libraries and bookstores and things like that. The marketing strategy that I've found best, and this is probably a bit genre related to children's books, but I do a lot of school visits as well and go out to schools and visit kids and do readings and workshops and stuff like that. And I sell my books at the schools as well. And so actually the best marketing strategy I found is that each year I'll contact 10 schools that had good sales and that there'd been a good relationship and good sessions with. And I'll say, look, can I come out and do a visit for the day? I'll give you a free visit, so I'll forego the booking fee if I can sell the books and get a bit of buzz around the books, but also give the kids a chance to see the book before anyone else, potentially before it goes out to the general public or even just after, but they'll get that first look at the books. And doing those 10 or sometimes 12 or 15 schools, I found like doing a book launch in a library, like my best book launch in a library, I think I sold about 80 or 90 books, which was amazing. But there's the potential to do at least that at every school I go to. So I've done launches in schools and sold, over the sort of 10 to over 1,000 books. And so I found that for me, and again, it's not relevant to everybody, but there might be something similar that can be used even for different genres of books. And I just find going back to the schools and that face-to-face because then you've got your audience there that likes the stuff from the year before. They're the age group that you're aiming at, because even you can have friends and family, but they don't necessarily have children or friends with children in the age group of the book that you've written. So they might come along and support, but they don't necessarily get the book. And so for me, that real targeted age and audience for the books has been, for me, the best thing. So I guess, in terms of marketing strategy, it's targeted marketing, I guess, really is the main thing. And I found that's worked better than online stuff, than book launches, but actually going out to the schools, reading the book, doing like, there's usually a new how to draw book. I'll do pictures with the kids, they'll get to draw. And that's been by far the best marketing strategy for book launches that I've done.
Well, and with those books, they're probably all to a point where you could actually read the whole book out to them in, 10 or 15 minutes, with it being a children's book.
Yeah, totally. If it's a picture book, for sure, even less sometimes. And even if it's a chapter book, so even if it's a bit of a longer one, just reading, 2 or 3 pages, over sort of 5-10 minutes. And then I also do a lot of interaction with the kids where I'll read a bit and I'll say, so in this section, I use the technique of exaggeration. And then I'll get them to tell stories about themselves, and then we'll exaggerate those. And I find that sort of reading from the book, relating it, and teachers like it when you relate it to a writing technique as well. And then getting the kids interactive, they feel like they've got a bit of almost ownership over the story in a way, even though we're doing something sort of separate to the story, they kind of get that little bit of ownership over it, and that belief that they can do it as well. Like I think even with the drawing as well, but with the writing, they go, oh, I can do that. Like it gives them that sort of confidence and interest in writing and reading the book that they might want to read the rest of it to just see how the full story works out and realize that they can actually do it. So I find that really helpful as well.
Well, you had me smiling. I was a teacher for 9 years, so I love anything to do with real life application. So any real life application that you can utilize where you're teaching it back to the kids, that was such a great example about giving them an example for exaggeration, because there's one thing kids know how to do, it's exaggerate.
Yeah, they totally do. And they're hilarious. Like the stuff they come up with, I just sit there laughing. Like I just think they're fantastic. And it's kind of that thing of, like I agree that application, because I was a bit of a numbers maths nerd at school and everything, and I love math, but I think the reason a lot of people don't like maths is you just look at it and go, I'm never going to use this stuff in my life. Like, why does this even matter? But if it can be related back to practical things and because I get them to, with the exaggeration, I get them to tell a story about themselves. So it's actually a real concrete thing for them that happened to them, but then we turn it into this, amazing story. And it's like, wow, that's actually my thing turned into a story. So it is that practical, relatable thing. And I agree with you. That's again, I think the best way to learn, because if it's not relevant, why do you care? Like, it doesn't even matter.
Exactly. So these have been pretty easy questions, I think, for you so far. I want to ask you the hardest question now, and that is, what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it, Adam?
Oh my gosh.
I know.
That is the hardest question.
It really is.
It really is. And because, every book, not that they're all my favorite, but, you don't want to put out stuff that you don't like. So there's even every book, there's bits of it that I really like. But I'm going to go, can I talk about 2 books? Is that okay?
Why not?
Okay. So my favorite one for a long, long time was a book called The Incredible Journey of Pete McGee. And it was the first longer book I'd written. When I started out, I was writing just little poems and short stories and things like that. And this was sort of 32 or 35,000 words. And it took me a year to write the first draft, and I edited it over 9 years or something like that. I ended up getting published like 10 years after I wrote the first draft. But probably the thing I learned from it, there was a couple of different things. One is that like even looking back at it now, I realize it needs a massive edit. Like there's certain bits where there's one paragraph that goes for a page and a half. With that one, I think 2 other things. The number one thing I learned from it is that it's about story. Like I think that book for me was, again, kind of relatable. Like the main character in that, Pete McGee, he is a kid, but he's the sort of person that I want to be. Like he's got characteristics that I want. Like he's brave and he's loyal and he's generous and he's vulnerable and all these things. And so putting that into him, I was just writing about the best version of myself that I want to be. And so doing that, it kind of gave it this really nice energy, I think. And so that was probably the number one thing I learned from it. A very quick number 2 thing that I learned from it was that at one stage it got rejected, and the comment that came back, because there was a narrator running through it, and the comment came back that they found the narrator annoying. So when I submitted it again, I totally took out the narrator, even though it was one of my favorite parts of the book was the narrator. So I took it out, submitted it again, and it ended up getting rejected. And so I thought, this is ridiculous. It's getting rejected, and I don't even like it as much. So I may as well actually put the narrator back in. So I put the narrator back in, and when it got published, that became a lot of people's favorite part of it as well. And so just that learning that if you can get rejected writing stuff that you don't like, so you may as well write stuff you do like, and then at least you enjoy writing it and have that connection with the book because you've been authentic with it, I think, rather than writing for someone else and thinking you're doing what they want you to do. And then my second favorite book, which isn't out yet, it's actually coming out next year. There's 2 books in the series called Cowboy and Bird Brain. And the number one thing I learned from that was just to kind of get out of my own way. That was probably the loosest I've ever been writing a book, where I just kind of wrote it and I would watch like some improv comedy skits before it, and just to open myself up and write it and just let it flow. And so I think that one has become possibly the most natural, sort of authentically me book that I've ever written, I think. So again, learn that thing of not overthinking it and thinking it has to be this and has to be that and has to be this structure and has to have these things. Just write it, and you can always go back and change it later. But this one, I just wrote it, and it kind of just worked because it wasn't me getting in the way of myself. I just gave you like 5 different things from my one favorite thing, I think.
Hey, that was great. So for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
Well, again, I kind of have two. My favorite quote has pretty much always been, I love Bruce Lee, massive Bruce Lee fan of his movies and his philosophies. And he has a quote, which is longer than this, but the gist of it is, "Be water, my friend," which I actually have a tattoo of that in his handwriting. And so it's about that being adaptable and working into situations and everything. But I heard a great quote from Will Smith the other day, which was, "Impossible is not a fact, it's an opinion." And I really, really like that because it's true. Like, so much stuff that happens now that we take for granted would have seemed impossible 50 years ago or 100 years ago. And so impossible's not even a thing. It's just people say and think it's impossible, but other people always find a way to make it possible. So I really like that. And certainly starting out in kids' books here in Australia, like a lot of people and a lot of articles I read and a lot of people here say, you can never make a living writing children's books in Australia. It's impossible. And so I kind of thought, well, no, it's not. And my, oppositional personality went, I'm gonna show you can make a living, and I do, and a lot of people do, and maybe it's hard, but it's not impossible. And a lot of things people think are impossible, they set these limits that I think you can definitely go past, and you set limits on yourself, and you can break through them, and then you realize that if you can do that, there's so many other things you thought were impossible that you can probably do as well.
Yeah, one of my favorite books is the Tawa Ji Kondo, which one of
Yes.
Bruce Lee's books, and I absolutely loved
Yes.
it. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I also have that shirt that says "Fears for Others" on it. So I'm always a big fan of his. Well, Adam.
Yeah, his stuff's amazing. I've got a lot of books. Sorry. Yes.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, he's one of my favorite authors. People ask me, Bruce Lee's one of your favorite authors? I'm like, yeah, he's a lot of great books, and the Tao Jeet Kune Do is one of my favorites.
Absolutely, and he's so essays. I've got a lot of his essays and stuff that he wrote as a philosophy and when he was writing philosophy. And yeah, so I was going to say that I think his essays and his philosophies on life in general are just amazing. So yeah, sorry, I was totally going to go on.
No, you're good. You're good. Well, Adam, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
So if they just Google Adam Wallace, that usually my name usually comes up first. But the website it's a bit of a complicated one. It's www.adam-wallace-books.com. Otherwise, on Facebook and Twitter and all that sort of stuff, it's just Wally's Books, at Wally's Books. So that's probably the easiest way to do it.
All right, Adam. Well, thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thank you. You too. And thanks so much for having me.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how you can be featured in our brand new Get Published business book, go to getpublishedpodcast.com.